Hey, thank you for your support of Shabbat Night Live. Before the break, we were talking about the atmosphere around Mount Sinai when God gave his commandments, the thunder, the lightnings, the clouds, everything. That ain't nothing compared to when Yeshua comes back. So Joel, we were talking during the break here about how that is a foreshadowing of Revelation. And I tell people all the time, if they want to understand Revelation, even just a little bit like Michael Rood does, who, by the way, is in the back of the studio today watching us do this, read Exodus first and skip everything else and go right to Revelation, and you'll start to see all kinds of correlation. Is that how you see it too?
Yeah, 100%. So, just on the surface, right, you can point to the plagues and the judgments of the seals, the trumpets, and the bowls in the book of Revelation are clearly patterned after the plagues of the Exodus. And so much of the language in the book of Revelation is drawn from the Exodus. And then you see things like when all is said and done, they sing what? The Song of Moses and the Song of the Lamb. And you see a lot of those just surfacey correlations. But what a lot of people don't realize is the depth to which the return of Jesus is patterned after the Exodus. So I wrote a whole book on this called Sinai to Zion. But essentially, if you survey the various passages throughout the Old Testament, you don't even have to look at the New Testament. Throughout the Old Testament, you have a handful of passages: Deuteronomy 33, Judges 5, Psalm 68, Habakkuk 3, Isaiah 63. They describe God, Yehovah, as marching. He's in anthropomorphic form. So he's in the form of a man. He has hands and feet. He's marching in front of his people. And he is destroying and slaughtering his enemies. Now, theologians will look at these passages and they go, oh, it's the Exodus, but it's using flamboyant, overly exaggerated, poetic language. We know that the Lord didn't literally march in front of Israel during the Exodus and this type of thing. You go, well, that's one way of viewing it, is just the Bible's just exaggerating and using over-the-top language. Or you can view it the way all of the New Testament writers view it, which is to say, no, these passages are actually prophecies. They use Exodus language. It actually says, the Lord comes from Sinai. He's portrayed as marching from the south, from the region of Sinai, up through Paran and Basra and Edom, and he's soaked in blood. It says, the blood of his enemies. Now, that language, by the way, of the divine warrior soaked in the blood of his enemies, where does that pop up again? It's not just in Isaiah 63, it pops up in Revelation, where he is treading the winepress of the wrath of God Almighty. And so again, that's just another example where Revelation is drawing from these passages. Yes, they use Exodus imagery, they use Exodus language, but it's not looking back at the Exodus, it's looking forward to the return of Yeshua, the return of the divine warrior.
So we're mentioning real places on a real map. Mm-hmm. And so I guess one would have to almost look at that just obviously and say, well, why would these places be named, literal places be named, if this was not to be a literal event? It's not just a figurative thing. When people always ask me, well, is the Bible literal or figurative? It's both. It's always both. So is that what you see this as too? That yes, it could have some figurative meaning, but it's going to be literal too.
Yeah, look, you've got passages, let's say, okay, so understanding this, that when Yeshua returns, and I'll just say this, and I'll throw this out, and people will be like, wait, what? He will arguably retrace the steps of the Exodus. There's even a good case that could be made that he will return to Egypt and make his way all the way from Egypt and split the Red Sea yet again. There's actually quite a few passages that talk about this in Habakkuk 3 and Ezekiel, him splitting the Red Sea again. Pharaoh is a type of the Antichrist. At times he's referred to as Leviathan or Rahab. his body slain in the desert, laid out in the desert, and this type of thing. But Yeshua will retrace the path of the Exodus, make his way up from the region of Sinai, up modern-day Saudi Arabia, up through Jordan, Basra, Petra, etc., and he will be setting prisoners free. So you go, is it figurative, is it literal? When you get to passages like Isaiah 35, where that talks about this highway in the desert, this is all part of the same story. Now, you can read it and be like, this is a wonderful, beautiful, poetic prophecy. No, it's literal. So the land of Israel, I'll just put it this way, from the north to the south, right? Like up in the Golan down to the Negev in the south, radically different biospheres, desert to lush. But when you go from the Mediterranean, you go down up to Jerusalem, up down to the Jordan River Valley, and then back up to, it's up, down, up, down. Like, so when you go east-west, Israel is basically up, down, up, down, up, down. When you look at Isaiah 35, it says, the mountains will be lowered and the valleys will be lifted up. You go, so is that literal or figurative? You go, I don't know, but it's using poetic, figurative language, but it's describing a very literal event. It's describing the highway. It's as though the earth itself is rolling out the red carpet for the king as he makes his way during this holy procession with all of the saints that he has set prisoners free, again, from prison camps. Israelites who have fled, many of them were taken captive. He sets them free, and as he makes his way up from, the area of Jordan around the north of the Dead Sea, into Jerusalem, it's like the earth itself is changing and rising and lowering to meet him. And so this is one, and it says, like the desert will rejoice and be glad. You go, well, is that figurative or literal? I don't know. Can dirt rejoice? But it's using the language of reversal. That which is dry and barren and cracked and desolate is blossoming and becomes springs of life. It's singing, it's rejoicing. And so again, is it figurative? Is it literal? Here's what I know, is that in this age, all of us, even in Yeshua, we struggle with anxiety, with sadness. The day is coming, it says, when gladness and joy will overtake us. Everlasting joy will crown us. And that's the language. The day of the Lord, the return of Jesus, the return of Yeshua, is the great reversal. From that day forward, there's no more anxiety. Say to those with anxious hearts, be encouraged. Your king is coming. Vengeance is coming. Justice is coming. So it's both, as you said. It's figurative, it's literal. It's using poetic language to speak of beautiful, glorious, literal future realities that you and I will see with our eyeballs in their glorified, resurrected eye sockets. You know what I'm saying? We will have bodies. We will see that day. It's as real as this moment is real.
I can see that because, I have this Bible at home that Keith Johnson has had me bring onto the stage a couple of times. It's called the Jerusalem Bible. It's this old Catholic Bible that was originally translated from French to English. So it's got a really different take on some of the passages, and it has the Apocrypha in it. That's why I wanted it. I got it for $5 at this used bookstore. So it's got the Apocrypha in it, and it has Ecclesiasticus and Tobit and all these other books in it. But anyway, what's interesting about it is that the way the Exodus is lined out in that Bible, I started to notice something, that all of the plagues that happened in the Exodus, Yeshua, with his miracles, reversed each one of them. As you say, it's a reversal. So, and as we know in Hebraic thought, something is not fulfilled once. It's fulfilled over and over again, different ways. So this was sort of the intermediate, if you will, fulfillment of the reversal of the curses of Exodus, or the disasters in Exodus, the plagues. But the greater version is coming even later with Revelation. I love that.
Yeah.
And could it be that, let me ask you this. So I know that, when we talk of Yeshua coming back and bringing his people to Israel, so Israel's borders today are not what the Bible describes as Israel. They're much, much larger.
Sure.
And the Great Rift Valley goes up there as well. There's a lot of geologic activity there with earthquakes and things like that. Could that maybe be part of it? The mountains coming down, the valleys coming up, all this type of talk?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously tremendous topographical changes. After he returns, Jerusalem itself is going to be completely transformed. I mean, it says there in Zechariah, right? The Mount of Olives will be split east-west. Half of it goes north, half goes south, and then they flee by this sort of valley that opens up. And of course, the thing that I always love is then it describes this river of life, this river flowing out from Jerusalem. And it goes down and it actually makes the Dead Sea fresh. That's going to take a lot of rinsing. That's a pretty deep body of water there. And it says, wherever the river flows, it will teem with life, with fish. It'll fish just like the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
And so,
not figurative fish, literal fish.
Yeah, literal fish. But see, again, that's an example of there's poetic beauty in that this river of life flows from Jerusalem. But it's also literal. Mm-hmm. And that's what's neat about the Lord, is that he actually has he's intricate enough to be able to intermix beautiful, poetic, prophetic imagery with very solid, literal realities.
Well, even in Revelation, where John describes, as Michael often brings up, a sea of fire and glass.
Yeah.
Well, what is that? Is it literal and figurative? Yes. It is. I just love that. And you think of how, even when Noah, right? When there was Noah's Ark, all the rain came down, but there wasn't, there had to have been water. The Bible does describe water coming up from, how does that happen? Well, the earth has to split. Yeah. Who says I can't do that again and make all of this happen,
Yeah. Yeah, and in fact, I think in last episode we talked about Ezekiel 40 through 48, which describes in tremendous detail Jerusalem. And Jerusalem itself will be radically different. And arguably, even the temple itself might not be in the exact same location. There's this whole sort of allotment for the Levites and the prince that it refers to as David and this type of thing. And some have speculated, again, I don't have a strong opinion on this, that the temple itself will actually be all the way up closer to Shiloh, which is in modern-day Samaria. But again, there's going to be massive topographical changes. All the cities of the earth will fall. And then we get the wonderful job of rebuilding in partnership with the master builder. And that's actually something to get excited about, right? Like, we get to partner with Yeshua in rebuilding the earth, being part of the Kingdom Garden Architectural Planning Committee. That sounds pretty cool.
It does. So I want to bring us back to something we talked about last week, and that was the rapture. Mm-hmm. And, when I tell people to look at Exodus and look at Revelation and compare the two, there's this, the Goshen principle, as it were, where the Israelites are there for some of the plagues, and then they're somehow protected from the rest. They're there, but it doesn't touch them.
Yep.
So is there some correlation to Revelation when we talk about the rapture, and when is it, and that principle?
Yeah, very much. Again, understanding that the tribulation, this final time of testing, is very much patterned after the events of the Exodus. There is no rapture in the Exodus. When the Lord is pouring out his plagues on the land of Egypt, Israel is, for most of it, they're in the land of Egypt, in Goshen, but the plagues don't touch them. And so the Lord delivers them, he saves them, and you could say that is the rapture, if you will. The ultimate deliverance is we are leaving behind the Egypt, this age, this world, etc. But there's not some deliverance 7 years before the Exodus, right? Like during the judgments when he is judging the wicked, executing his judgments on Egypt, he is preserving and protecting his people in Goshen. And that is the pattern that we should expect in the last days, which is to say, as the Lord, he's going to do a few things. He's going to do a few things during the tribulation. He's going to lovingly chastise his people Israel, just like a father does to his children, in order to bring them to a place of faith and salvation. He will break them. He's going to pour out his wrath, his judgment on unbelievers in order to justify his ultimate eternal wrath on them. And for the church, he's going to, for the believing community, he's going to give us an opportunity to be refined, to be purified, that our faith would be proven and it would be tested and proven. And there's another point here that I think a lot of our pre-tribulational friends miss. It will give us an opportunity, a redo, let's just say. During the Holocaust, unarguably, believers, not all believers, but the vast majority failed to be representatives of Yeshua to the Jewish people. Like I said, yes, people were being dragged out of their houses. Most German Christians, what they did was they closed the curtains. They turned up the music. They looked the other way. And there's no question that we as the church failed. I think the tribulation will be another opportunity for us to prove and to stand with Israel, to prove our love for the Jewish people. You know, the accusation that a lot of the anti-missionaries in Israel, they'll say, well, you just want the tribulation to come so that all the Jews can get killed so your Jesus can return, or this type of thing. You go, who says something like that? That'd be like saying to a husband, oh, you just want the due date to come because you want your wife to suffer birth pains. You go, what? No, I'm excited about the baby. The birth pains are part of the unfortunate process, but I'm going to hold her hand, if she'll hold it, and breathe with her and stand by her side throughout the birth pains, and then I'm going to walk out. Once the birth happens, there's a lot more that follows the birth, right? Like many, many years of parenting and suffering. And that's what the church wants to do with Israel. We're going to stand with her this time. And so there's an opportunity there. So there are multiple reasons for the tribulation. Our pre-trib friends will say, it's Jacob's trouble. That's the only purpose. No, the Lord is going to execute vengeance against the wicked. He's going to break Israel and chastise her unto redemption. And he's going to give the church, the corrupt, idolatrous church, the opportunity to be refined and to be purified. And that's, when I say the idolatrous church, I mean me, right? It's going to give all of us the opportunity to be refined and to be purified. So yes, and we will be protected. We will be preserved like jams or jellies. We will be preserved through the winter. We're not going to be removed from the winter. We'll be preserved through the tribulation.
Interesting. I like that. And perhaps that's how everybody comes together under one understanding that now you can't deny what's happening here.
Yeah.
It's this coming king that maybe most in the Christian world did not really expect, and the way he's coming back. But yet the Jews are going, now that's a Messiah. And they may recognize him faster than some of us do.
In Matthew 24, he says, after the tribulation, there'll be the cosmic signs. He says, and then they will see the sign of the Son of Man. I actually have speculated, and I believe that when he returns, it's not just going to be, forgive me, it's not just going to be this white hippie guy surfing on the clouds. I believe that the pillar of cloud is going to descend once again. And the clouds that he comes back in, I believe it will actually be the pillar of cloud. So you say it'll be much different than what a lot of Christians are expecting. How will the Jews recognize Jesus when he comes back? They go, oh, that's obviously Jesus. That's the guy that all the Christians, all these crazy Gentiles, no, they're not going to I believe there will be something distinctly Jewish, biblical, if you will, about his return that will cause all of them to recognize the one they've pierced. And I believe that it will actually be the pillar of cloud. Now, that will confuse Christians, not confuse Christians, but, you know, like that's not what Christians are expecting. But of course, Jews are not expecting him to come back as the Son of Man in anthropomorphic form. So there's a little bit of tweaking for everyone, so to speak.
You know, I see that in the story of Joseph too, where Joseph had, you know, he'd been taken in by the Egyptians, if you will, and then so they see him as his brother, and then he has to reveal himself to his original Jewish brother from his family.
Yeah.
So he reveals himself to them, and I'm sure the Egyptians are going, whoa, wait a second.
What's going on?
We thought you were this guy. You mean you're this guy?
Yeah.
I mean, and he obviously embodies the first and second coming of Yeshua, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a powerful picture, actually, in terms of the moment of eyes opening and going, oh, I thought you were a Gentile. I thought you were one of those crazy Gentiles. You're one of us. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's exactly how it describes in Zechariah 12, and then again in Matthew 24, and again for our pre-tribulational friends. When does that moment of awakening happen? When he returns after the tribulation. So yes, there will be a remnant of Jews that will come to faith during the tribulation, as there is a remnant now. But the corporate, all Israel will be saved, that Paul talks about in Romans 11, that happens when he returns, when he comes back to save them and us.
Thank you, Joel Richardson, for joining us here. Thank you for joining us.